Hey everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. So you're no doubt aware that this week sees the release of Ghost Stories, which is the big screen adaptation of the Olivier-nominated stage play by Jeremy Dyson and Andy Nyman that made its debut in 2010 in Liverpool, I believe, and went on to scare the shit out of people all over the world. And now the film has arrived to do the same thing. I saw this a couple of months ago and it stuck in my mind a lot purely because it is a lot of fun, and I would really recommend it for people who like good ghostly chillers, not gory films necessarily. This isn't a gory film, but it's a good creepy classic British ghost story. The general parameters of the stage production, which I haven't seen but I have read about, are basically the same, which is that Nyman himself plays Professor Goodman, who is a paranormal skeptic who has grown up, averse to any notion of the supernatural. There is a reason for this lurking in the background, which I won't reveal, but that does become more and more clear as the film goes on. He is then contacted by somebody who is apparently has returned from beyond the grave, who then presents him with 3 case studies. And he is then challenged to basically debunk these 3 allegedly alleged accounts of supernatural hauntings. And the 3 men in question in each of the case studies are played by Paul Whitehouse, Alex Lawther, and Martin Freeman. So it's a terrific cast of really good, well-established British acting talent, and in the case of Lawther, like rising talent as well. He was in the Black Mirror episode Shut Up and Dance, which remains one of the most disturbing and I think brilliant of the entire run. And then as Nyman's character digs into these case studies, there's a creeping sense of unease starts to sort of take hold, and he starts to realise that not all is as it seems. I won't go any further than that in terms of the plot, because this movie does actually take some really nice twists and turns as it goes on. And it starts off as one particular thing, and then very gradually, in the manner of a great ghostly chiller, it comes up and it breathes down your neck, and you start to realise there are actually other considerations going on in this story. What to say about this film? Well, firstly, I mean, I'm a big fan of ghost stories as a genre anyway. I love ghostly movies, things like the original Haunting, not the Owen Wilson remake where he was decapitated by a stone line in a fireplace. I'm talking about the original Robert Wise Haunting. The Innocents, The Changeling, the others. I love a good, creepy, like gothic chiller, and this does really have that kind of eerie, classically British windswept atmosphere that you would expect from not only like those movies, but also the Hammer movies, and also the likes of the Victorian literary masters like M.R. James and Charles Dickens, all of whom they understood that in order to scare with a ghost story, you can have the moment of revulsion and you need to have the moment of shock, but you also need to have that genuine sense of the uncanny, the fact there is something creeping up on you and you can't quite put your finger on what it is until it's too late. This gets that brilliantly. What it also does, it meshes that sense of the uncanny and the eerie with an onslaught of jump scares, and starting right from the very beginning, and you kind of think jump scares in and of themselves aren't actually scary. I mean, you get like a physical sort of jolt like that, but a jump on its own terms isn't scary. Although it's like the classic thing that Alfred Hitchcock said, which is there's no terror in a bang, just in the anticipation of it. And I think there has been a temptation with the likes of the Sinister and the Insidious movies, which are perfectly fine. There is a temptation just to make people jump, but not to leave people thinking about anything afterwards. Whereas what this film does brilliantly is it does leave you thinking. It does genuinely worm its way down into your subconsciousness, and you do genuinely end up thinking about the characters and the situations, and it creates a very distinctive visual landscape and sonic landscape as well. Frank Ilfman's score is very creepy. That will stick with you. It will stick with you beyond the sort of the moments of, beyond those sort of moments of shock. And I saw this in a screening back in February with a group of critics, and everyone was having a whale of a time. It is like being on a ghost train, but it will stick with you. I mean, it's genuinely well made. It's well scripted. It's really well acted. I mean, each of you've got the overarching sort of heart of the movie is provided by Andy Nyman, who does an absolute masterclass in this sort of slowly disintegrating sort of psyche at the centre of it. But also you have Paul Whitehouse playing against type. Paul Whitehouse, best known of course for his collaboration with Harry Enfield, doing a really good sort of eerie take of a guy who's clearly been consumed by this horrible supernatural event. He plays a night watchman who comes across something horrible in a former abandoned lunatic asylum for women. That's done really well. Alex Lawther, meanwhile, does an absolute brilliant job of this sort of bug-eyed insanity, and he really does convince you that he's playing this teenager who, whilst out driving his parents' car in the woods against them without their knowledge, it comes across something that's genuinely quite hideous. And then you've got Martin Freeman. Martin Freeman plays again against type as this quite slimy, oily lawyer character whose life starts to unravel as a result of these supernatural things. So brilliantly acted across the board. I think brilliantly scripted. Again, I've not seen the stage production, but this would appear to be very loyal to it. On its own terms, it's very well written, beautifully filmed, beautifully scored, and again, it shows a real love of classic horror tradition, more specifically classic British horror tradition. I mean, Brits can do horror brilliantly, and it's all about really a lot of the terror comes out of the countryside and out of the landscape. And Britain has obviously got such a rich and storied history, and this really does tap into that. Again, like writers like M.R. James, who I would consider the greatest of all ghost story writers, like he used to do. So it's out this Friday. I'd really recommend it for those who don't just want a sort of visceral, jumpy experience, but who actually want something that's going to stick with them as well. It's called Ghost Stories. Let me know here at Kubrick Corner what you make of the film. Until then, sleep tight.